Okay, Nolan, all yours.
All right. Hopefully get a mirror. Okay. So again, Nolan Clayton, Simply Measure. And I'm going to give it a talk today on Vaadin, and not so much just on learning Vaadin, but like the experience, the developer experience. I don't think that's something that we talk about a lot. We talk about, oh, this framework's pretty cool, has some features, but like, how was it for like anybody to come get started in it? Just a new person, fresh off the street, didn't know it. So it's kind of what I did. Went through. We don't use it currently. It's one of the things that we build a lot of services, and it might be nice to have something like this. And I'll talk more about that as I go through. So, who am I? Java developer. Been doing this probably for about 10 years. Like some of the different apps that I've worked on, different companies. I started as a 3D developer, so a lot of 3D software development, OpenGL, OpenSceneGraph, Delta 3D, if you guys are familiar with any of that stuff. Had an interesting little spin at a burn unit, working on burn software. So that was pretty crazy, life and death sometimes. So I thought that was a little much. And then so moved on, and this is one of the current products that I work at our company, internal tool. We build a lot of reports, and this tool kind of helps the analyst manage that data and manipulate it, transform it, and then output that. So again, worked for Simply Measure. Damon kind of already gave a little talk about that. Started in 2010. I think our headcount, would you say, it's about 130?
Yeah, that might be a little off right now.
A little pull request on that one. But again, we're hiring. We're always hiring. So if anybody's interested, please come talk to us. I know there's a lot of people here recruiting, but we're hiring. So how do we use Java? For our whole report pipeline, pretty much every piece along the way is built in Java. From our processing engine to our kind of our workflow engine that controls each step along the way, and down to template generation. So that's all done in Java using POI and other things. So I wanted to bring Damon up for this a little bit, talk about kind of what we do at Simply Measure, give you a little spiel about what we make. So let's see.
Yeah, so this is just the header of one of our reports. Like I mentioned, we started back in 2010. We actually started as a company called Untitled Startup because we had no business plan, no product, no idea. It was just a couple of guys who like to build tools in the social space. And somebody was crazy enough to give us some money and say, why don't you go try to do this for real? So like any good startup, we started with Ruby on Rails and a bunch of Ruby on the back end. And after about a year, we realized that that wouldn't scale for some of the things that we were doing. So we renamed ourselves to Simply Measure. We went more towards the enterprise market, and we brought in some folks that could actually do some Java work to help us make some more robust services on the back end. So that was kind of 2011. And so these days, we work a lot with big marketers and agencies and stuff like that. So American Express, Alaska Airlines, if you see people using social data, there's a good chance they're using us to kind of pull that in. And so what's happening here, this is our Twitter report. We did it on the @Vaadin account because it's relevant here. So what we do, we just monitor the Twitter stream on an ongoing basis, suck all of that into our infrastructure. We use HBase, so I'm going to call out Jody because he's one of the guys that helps make sure that that all runs nicely. But jam all this data into HBase, and then we help generate these reports off of HBase, and this is where our report pipeline comes in. That is largely Java. And so our customers use this to figure out what is actually going on with the stuff that they're doing on social. When they share data, is it doing anything useful? And you can see the Vaadin account, they've sent 23 tweets, 31 unique people have engaged with them. As a result of that, all the way down the end of the funnel, there's about 130,000 potential impressions there. And so we have a whole bunch of different reports like this. Part of the crazy thing that we do, all of these reports are actually built inside of Excel, which might seem weird, but the cool thing is when you download this, you get a report where the web dashboard looks exactly the same as it does in the Excel dashboard. And then you switch over to the data tab, and all the data in the report is exactly what backs up the web dashboard as well. So kind of a unique approach to how we build reports. But yeah, I mean, that's kind of who we are and what we do, and I hope that gave a good overview.
Again, along the way, feel free to ask questions. I might ignore you, but feel free to ask. And we have a ton of swag to give out, so definitely ask questions. Okay, there's our little hiring skill again. Can throw that one in one more time. It is a great place to work. I can't say enough about it. I mean, it's just some of the best people you can work with, some of the funnest people that you can work with. We work hard and we play hard. It is just a great place. So, why Vaadin? Just a quick little poll. Is anybody building UI with Java right now? What are you using?
GWT.
GWT. Okay. Anybody else?
Vaadin.
Vaadin. Hey, somebody using Vaadin. Hit him with an umbrella. Hit him with an umbrella. Throw it across the room. I'm going to pass it through. All right. Okay. So why did I choose Vaadin? I've kind of seen Vaadin for several years, you know. Seen it kind of been growing. Initially on it had a lot of, I guess, pain points people had with it. Didn't get a lot of great reviews from my experience. This could be other people's. It could be different. But I've seen them grow as a community, grow as a company, and they've really, I felt like they've really stepped it up. I think WIT has done that as well too. It went through a couple little phases there and has really come around strong as of late. So the Y21 Days, there's this company, you might have heard of them, Sam's, maybe developers, I've seen some of their books. It's kind of a thing, and a good little approach to take. So 21 days, that's not 21 full days, to me, 8 hours a day. You know, that's time at night. Looking at this is like a normal developer, right? We don't have all the free time in the world, right? We have a full-time job, and we want to learn something new. So, could I do it in 21 days? Yes. So, let's go through this. Yeah. So week 1, step through. First thing I did was watch videos. These Vaadin guys are really great about that. They post a ton of videos. Most of them are from Finland, so there's a little bit of a cultural thing. Sometimes I felt like they were a little sad in having to make the videos, but I don't know if that was just a cultural thing. So there's definitely some fun videos out there. Read the manual. They spent a lot of time on this book. There is a huge online book that goes through everything. Takes you from beginning to end. And then you have the normal cheat sheet that's out there, full of tons of great stuff that you can go through. So hopefully some of this stuff as we go through will save you time if you're interested in learning this, kind of the stuff that I had to do to get through it. So for the first week, there was just so much content out there. It was really trying to like narrow it down. What is the most useful content? What can I get out of this? Like, there's so many videos. Like, they're showing me somebody else's example of how to do this. Is this right? Is this going to help me get through? Is this what I need? A lot of times you're trying to build something special for your company, for your special needs, right? I don't just need buttons. You know, I don't need hello worlds. So there's a ton on there that will help you get through that. Okay. First video I watched was Beautiful Vaadin. So how many people use Spring Boot? All right, tons of people. Likes, dislikes? You guys love it?
I think it improved the Spring experience a lot for
Yeah.
bootstrapping.
Definitely. Josh Long and Peter have a great video for anybody who wants to get started. All the source code is in GitHub. That is the big thing that I loved about this, the experience along the way, was everything was in GitHub. Every example, pretty much anything out there was in GitHub. All their demos, their dashboards, everything in GitHub. Let me show some swag on that one too. Through. All right. So, week 2, I downloaded a ton of examples, tried to get them up and running. Some of the right off the bat, one of the first pain points I had was we use Nexus at work. Anybody use Nexus? So we had a ton of pain working with their add-ons library. Jody saved my butt on that. We had to build a bunch of proxies to get their stuff to mirror correctly. And there was a couple of them that just would not upload, and I couldn't get some of their jars to just download. So I had to manually upload those into our Nexus repo, which is probably not a good thing. Somebody else probably knows a better way to do it, but we had to get going. Had to download to do it. So that was one of the biggest pain points I had right off the bat. You use Vaadin already. Do you use Nexus as well too? Oh, okay. So there's probably, I search high and low for examples of how to do it correctly to get their stuff mirrored correctly. I just couldn't get it to happen. But after some fumbling around, we were able to get kind of working correctly. So the big one right off the bat, and we'll go through the source code later on, is that dashboard demo that I talked about. It kind of has a really cool mock-up, especially if you're building services. You want to monitor them, you want to look at their uptime, build charts, all that kind of stuff. That dashboard demo is awesome. The Spring Data one, right off the bat, that's a great one for us. We're all using Spring JPA. So this is also another big one. So if you're a web developer, you're using a ton of JavaScript libraries. Font awesome. I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with that. They completely integrated that, so it's just like an enum that you pull in, and you have those icons. So there's the web dashboard. Pretty much has all the bells and whistles on here. I really loved it. I mean, I love fun. It's great for the demo. But as a Java developer, it was nice to, like, I could build this in Java. And it seems like they have all the tools available for this. So it's one of the, I don't have it. I'll bring it up in a second. So week 3. So I spent this time learning this, going through, watching these videos. Like, well, what do? I mean, great, you kind of learn some things along the way, but I'm going to go give this talk at this Java users group. They're probably going to want to see something more than just some screenshots of stuff other people built. So what can I build? Calculator, maybe something like that. No. So saw the Seizure website. Thought maybe we could use a little touch of love. Just a little bit. And again, this isn't Vaadin's main use case, right? Vaadin's use case is to build web applications, right? Not just to build a website. But I wanted to get something up and running. And so one night, I spent just kind of ripping content off the page and getting up a Seizure website, redoing it. You can see how beautiful it renders in Vaadin. You also know that it scales pretty well too. These are different screen sizes here. I love it. I'm not sure how you feel about it. So I have a full demo on this with source code as well too that integrates with all their themes as well too. I didn't get a matrix theme in there. A little sorry about that. Anyway.
It's been mentioned the Seizure King is very 90s and needs to be updated. So contributions.
Yes. So definitely I'll have that up for you. So show me some code. Hello world. Pretty simple. I guess it's a little more advanced. Right? It has a push button and a notification. If you'll notice when you look at this, it's very similar to Swing. How many Swing developers or people have done Swing? Anybody still doing Swing? All right, I got one. You get an umbrella. Just for that. Send it on. Yeah. I feel your pain. Okay, send it on.
It's simply tears.
How do you guys use Swing?
Okay. We've got an internal application that allows people to crawl a file system and perform some actions.
So a good portion of like the Swing apps are our internal apps, similar to ours, that people work on. A big pain point that we have with our Swing app, and I don't know the same with you. Do you use WebStart or something like that? How do you deploy that?
It's on a pretty small network, so it's just deployed with a script.
Okay.
Launch a script.
Yeah. Some of the biggest pain points that we have with like our Swing app is WebStart, and so it's kind of one of the reasons we're looking at Vaadin too. Is like, hey, we'd like to get on Swing. You know, how much of a pain point is that? Could we build other things with that? So anyway. So just your standard, right? You're going to create a layout. Set the content on the page. You add the component new label, hello world. And then we also add a button. And it's got a listener, similar to what you would see in Swing, right? Action listener. Click it, button, show notification, push. Really simple, really straightforward. Not a ton goes into it. 3 imports. So,
Hey, can I point out one thing to people who are new, go back to your code. You notice here that this is a whole interactive website. There's no HTML, there's no CSS, there's no JavaScript, it's all pure Java, nothing else.
yeah, that's a big thing. I mean, so, go ahead.
I was just gonna, I'm not sure, you might already be planning to mention it, but there's a relationship between Vaadin and GWT, right?
Right. So I didn't cover much of the history on Vaadin. That's not, and again, so for this talk, I'm not the Vaadin expert, right? So this is just somebody who didn't have pretty much any Vaadin experience other than knowing about it, and kind of seeing it grow. Just stepping through day one, what could we build, that kind of stuff. So Vaadin is built on GWT. You can correct me if I'm wrong. And so you can still use a lot of GWT components. I think you have to make a couple modifications. You actually have to make it a Vaadin component to integrate it well.
Yeah, you can make your own GWT components if you want to.
Yeah, so-
I mean, basically that's what Vaadin's done for you, is
Right.
provide.
They kind of wrapped all that. If somebody's built a GWT component out there that you want, though, I think you do have to put like a wrapper on top of it.
But to build apps like this, you don't have to know
Right.
anything about GWT.
Right. So they give you a pretty big, robust component set, and we'll go through it. As far as like any other UI toolkits that I don't know if any of you guys are familiar with, like WX widgets, Qt, just some of the standard like Windows, even going way back to MFC, right? You're gonna have buttons, you're gonna have drop downs, combo boxes, all kinds of stuff. So that's all available to you. Straightforward, easy, ready to go. Let me- There we go. Okay, so I've got a couple of these demos already on my box, and we'll step through kind of the first one. This was one of the first ones that got me up and running. So this is the Spring Data with Vaadin, just simple CRUD application. So this is your standard Spring Boot. If you guys are familiar with Spring Boot, this is just the entry point here, your main. There's some stuff here. I'm not sure that you actually need all this. This does some better compression so that stuff coming from the server side, renders faster, is packed smaller and whatnot. You actually don't need that. I can delete that and it would still run. So if you wanted to keep it real simple, real small. Look at our back end. We have our person, right? Simple Pojo, right? All your getters and setters. And please stop me if you're not familiar with like JPA or any of this stuff. We can talk about kind of what this is, but this class just basically represents a table, right? In our database, the person table. And then our wonderful Spring repository with no code, right? So great thing about Spring and Spring Data, right? It builds all those for you. You don't have to write any of that code. So all your queries are in there, and you can add extra queries if you want. So let's open our Vaadin class. So just as you saw in the Hello World, right, you've got a Vaadin UI. You get that extra special annotation on top with Spring, and that's, I think, for Spring to recognize it, like kind of making a Spring component, so it builds that right away for you, picks that up. And then this was the great thing. This was the thing that I really loved. So they got a table here, and all they do is they hook it up to the person class, and it already knows. It knows how to build those things. You add the columns that you want, and it wires the columns up for you, right? Which was difficult. Like if you had like Swing, you had to build a whole model for your person, right? So it knows which column to go to and where. But it just auto wires, and that's one of the great things I love about it. The other thing was it's just standard buttons here, right? Font awesome, plus sign. You got all the full icon set that scales, and it's a font, so it scales for you. It scales as your buttons scale. So building our main page, right? Another layout, just a simple vertical layout, stacking components one on top of another. Little horizontal layout here for our buttons to keep them right together, nice and pinned. Actually, let's run that real fast. Stop here, I'm not sure. You see all my local hosts there, quite a bit of Vaadin demos running there. And boom, that's what we get. So this simple part up here was just rendered from I believe they just have a simple like README file. So this rich text displayed at the top there are simple 3 buttons here that are pinned together with a horizontal layout. And then that table that I talked about that just wires everything together there in our person class. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward, real easy to use. For a lot of us that are building backend services, we have a ton of these classes, right, that we need to look at. We want to see what the data's in there. We want to monitor, see what people are doing. This is a great, easy way to get that data out there, make it visible. That's one of the big things that we talk about on our shirt is data where it didn't happen. You know, you want to be able to monitor that, get that up, get something, show it to the people around you. And so this is very simple, straightforward. You get sorting right off the bat. Not much extra code went into that. Real simple, real straightforward.
So I have a question, I don't know if you're gonna touch on this or not, but how easy is it to customize the look and feel of, say, that auto-generated table there?
So that was one of my concerns too. So when you look at when I bring up the Seizure website, I will show you just kind of, they have a theme demo, so you build your own custom theme. Just like in HTML, how you would style things with CSS, you can build that out. How you want things to look, you can add style names, you can do different things to change up the colors of each cell in that table.
When you do that, would that be in HTML or in Juggler?
So you can build up those themes in CSS, and then you can add those themes in Java. So you do need a little bit of CSS. I mean, I think you're always going to need that as far as automotive is concerned. I think there's some things as well you can do in here. But as far as like coloring and stuff, most of that is all done in CSS.
Well, the
experts.
themes, actually the themes are surprisingly flexible. If you look into them, you can programmatically in Java, like do a black, white on black instead of black on white. And they have some blue background colors too. There's several variations on the themes. So without touching any web stuff, you can actually do that in Java.
Right, but you're still adding the style, right?
No, not adding CSS styles. There's alternate styles built in basically. The theme is actually a set of different styles.
Right.
There's like a default one shown. So there's actually quite a bit of flexibility without you having to touch the CSS.
Yeah, without you having to touch, but under the hood, it's still, that's the CSS file from the theme that's built there. So you're really adding that style to whatever component it is, so when it's actually rendered, it shows up.
And going on from that, the CSS's themes are also pretty easy to customize. There's, like, you can create your own theme, and if you want such and such component, there's basically, I forget what it's called, SCSS, where you can just like call a method, pass in a few parameters, and then when it compiles the CSS, that will propagate those new variables that you want for the colors throughout the application, so you get a uniform sort of shades or colors and that sort of thing.
Coming at you.
But let me add though, if you really love tweaking HTML and CSS and you want to take full control of it, you shouldn't use Vaadin. It's like Vaadin, the whole point of Vaadin is you don't have to do all that CSS and HTML work.
Yeah, so as I went through, and especially trying to get the Seizure side up, there's some of the content I was like, I don't want to completely rip and rebuild this in Vaadin. I'm just going to copy the HTML and put it in a label, and it will render for me. So if you do have stuff that you want, you can copy that, the lower portions. The part that you want to build out in Vaadin is the application part, the logic, the flow, that kind of stuff. Your simple README pages and stuff like that, you can just get somebody to write. Any other questions on customization?
So, I mean, one of the reasons that Swing goes through all that effort to actually, create the entire separation model layer and this, that, and the other is so that you don't, as much as this does the auto detection for you, and that is really, really nice, you decouple your actual database schema from your model level is coming up and this, that, and the other. Is there an easy decoupling mechanism that Vaadin is providing here? Some JPA equivalent to, I don't know, like a transient or something like that that would let it skip over something as you're interacting with an object? Or is there a way to inject kind of an object style field? How do those get separated, or is there an easy separation mechanism?
Is there like a way to like similar to just like auto wiring something up that will fill in that data for you? Is that what you're?
I'm trying to
I
generate
think
some.
what you're trying to say is like, you don't just show what's in the database. Sometimes on a web page, you need to
Right.
customize it and use some
Right.
things and not use others, and it's hard to.
Right. So this isn't a full-on sample of how you would build like an application, right? This is a quick and easy, like how do you get this up and running? So a lot of times you're gonna have your custom model, right, of something. You'll have your database objects, right? And we're not. This is just pulling straight from the database here. But you can have like your layers in between, right? If you just want to render that, and you can query those and make those calls out.
So you could just pull this one layer up.
Yes, you can separate these. This is pretty tightly integrated here. But just to give you a quick example, shortcut.
It's also worth mentioning that in this case where it's, so the table has a container, and so in this case when it's auto building all the columns, you're using a bean item container, so where it auto recognizes the fields, and then you choose what columns you want to show. So you have control over the columns in that way, but also you can just do like a simpler container, and you can like literally just manually fill in the cells of the table too. So there is more control there than just auto showing a DTW.
Right, so you can add items, right? So that table's auto-wired. You can do it kind of the swing way where you're adding cells. And so they use that same kind of pattern with their trees as well too, where you just add a simple item that has the different fields that you actually want to show from there. Is there any more questions on this? I'll go through the rest of the file. Kind of show you like how you add sorting on here. Again, with the person, you can choose the sorting directions, which column you want to sort by first, that kind of stuff. Similar to what you did in Swing. So one of the projects that I did was internally we have some of our own custom data sources, and in one of our tools you can explore all those, and it's built in Swing, so you can explore all those data sources. It uses Swing's trees, the mutable tree nodes. It took me probably like an hour to convert that over, still keeping in all of our custom logic. So that was kind of tightly integrated with what part built it. But that was kind of like, I hadn't done anything with a tree before, but I'd done a ton with Swing trees. So an hour or so, I was up and running in Vaadin, displaying all of our data sources using their tree. Another part of this is they actually have an entry form, and I'll bring that up as well too. Let's bring this guy. So we got a couple text builds in here as well too. The other cool thing was about building these entry forms and working with data. This is all the source code that they have here for working with the entry form. I'll bring that entry form up from the web page. So all that code that you saw there renders this entry form. Very simple, very straightforward, pretty easy to maintain. I think that's one of the big things. One of the big things Java developers were looking at this, easy to refactor. The next great and awesome demo that we'll walk through was one that I really love because it has something in there that really relates to what we do in building these graphs. So they've got a demo app that runs with Neo4j. All right. Okay, so this app is another Spring Boot app with Vaadin that runs with Neo4j. And this guy hooked up a pretty cool little editor here to actually edit these your database tables for Neo4j. That cool. You know what he's saying? Might not. Oh, I wonder. Well, that's not good. So I'm actually, I would assume that he's probably linking in some JavaScript files that are hosted like through a CDN or something like that. Kind of wanted to show you guys this because they put a wrapper on just straight JavaScript, and it renders a graph that you can manipulate. Open it up. Yeah. And I don't know how often you guys do this. You guys link in JavaScript very much when you're building your Vaadin apps. So this one, that's us. I don't know, do you have internet access here, like guest access? Yeah, okay. We can get that set up. So this is straight up right here. It links in JavaScript. So you might have things that are already built that you want to use, components that are out there. A lot of people build a ton of great stuff in JavaScript that you want to wrap and also manipulate with your Vaadin app. It integrates well with that, as long as you have internet access. So, do you know the
Heinz Conference or Heinz Conference 5G, one of those access points? Right there, this
Yeah.
Heinz Conference 5G, yeah.
Mary starters, please say?
So what exactly does that add JavaScript do? I mean, does that actually let you manipulate the JavaScript or just use it as a script within the generated, HTML and everything? Or what exactly is it that you do?
With the JavaScript on there?
Yeah.
So
I'm
you can,
just putting in a JavaScript file, obviously.
right. So you could just, so I'm, again, not the expert on this, but you can build wrappers on top of like some of these JavaScript files
Okay.
that can manipulate what's inside the JavaScript. You can build custom components around that. Or you can just run in, like, you just want to run a straight canvas and like a portion of it, right? If you have a layout part that you want just a piece of JavaScript in there.
So you could like bridge to a JavaScript library, if you wanted to, for example.
Yeah.
I think the concept is similar to JNI.
Yeah, so, yeah.
But yeah, wrapping JavaScript
Mhm.
cross-platform way.
There we go. So, looking pretty straightforward, some cool stuff. We have that graphing application. It would be nice to have something like this in the web that our analysts could use. And again, just kind of wanted to show you some of the functionality that's out there, right? A lot of the resources that you have, and so someone's already invented this. You don't need to reinvent it, right? And so it's nice to integrate this in. I get feedback from that, add callbacks, that kind of stuff.
In your examples, did you find the generated JavaScript HTML page to be performant? Was it dragging those nodes around? Was there much lag, or was it pretty?
I didn't have any problem with that, and that could be just throughput, how much data I was pushing through, right? So my use case is to start, this is like most frameworks when you start out, right? You don't really run it through the paces, right? You don't send, billions of rows through it, right, to see what happens. And for the most part, it was pretty performant in everything that I did.
Along with that, most things default to lazy loading. So if you have a table, you have a selector, it's only loading 10 items at a time, and that really helps it too. We had a case where a client wanted a native selector, and there was like 3,500 items in it, and that killed performance on IE, but that was, I think, more IE's fault. So it's pretty good.
Yeah, so the auto pagination was kind of a great thing to have too.
Actually, follow-up questions. What browsers are officially supported? And like what versions, do you guys know? Mostly the latest modern
Yes, they have, so that, I believe they have that up on their website as far as which ones are supported. I imagine it's probably similar to what WIT supports.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's basically Vaadin 6 and Vaadin 7. 6 is still supported and it does all the old browsers. Vaadin 7 is just before the HTML5 focused browsers. So like IE 8, 9, and above are in Vaadin 7. So it's pretty good. It's pretty good support. So if you really need an older browser, you can use Vaadin 6, but otherwise 7 will do all the, I mean, they support Firefox, IE, I think Opera, Safari, on mobile ones too. They've reworked the widgets to be more mobile savvy. And what's cool is that you don't ever worry about browser. They've handled all the multi-browser.
So the one that I know you guys are super excited for, the Seizure website. So I built this off their Velo demo, which is the demo of all the themes that are out there. And so the person who ever asked about customizing, how easy it was to style things. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Let that notification go away. So try to match up kind of what you had on there already. Build that up. So let's just say we want to go with dark theme. So pretty straightforward, easy to customize. You don't have to, just use what comes with Vaadin. And that was I think a lot of the problems I think people had with Swing. It was difficult to style. There was a couple look and feels out there that you could use, but even that had problems, right? So this really straightforward, really easy to do. For me personally, coming from Swing to this, I loved it. It was great. Real easy to use. So samples of me just like dumping the HTML on there, putting it in like keeping your own formatting the way you had it. Simple stuff. Links.
Did you try it on iPad or anything, also just to see?
No, I didn't, but here's I think I did, there you go. There's a demo of it. Resizing, being responsive. Shrink it even lower. Back home. So, I mean, and all that came free. I didn't have to do anything special. I just turned on set responsive. So, I mean, it has a lot of bang for the buck. The time invested into it, to what you can do with it quickly, and how much code I actually have to generate for it. So we'll go through simple, just like the first home page here. So again, this is not the way to do it. We don't want to hard code strings, right? You can use resource files and whatnot from there, especially you want to internationalize, right? Simple, just put a label at the top, set the style name. So that's when we talked about styling. What it to be like render like an H1. Put in a vertical layout. I stored things at the top. A lot of people will just build it in the constructor. I wanted to wait till it was initialized. I just dumped some of the meetings into a JSON file and then dumped that into JPA. And so I have a repository, and I find the latest one, sort by date, so that the latest meeting will always show up. Get a meeting, initialize a meeting. Can't find any meetings, I'm able to load meeting information, can't talk to our database or whatever. From that meeting, you can build a panel, build a person, style it the way you want to. I wanted a different color on top, so in this CSS file, like you said, they have some things that are already defined. In this demo, color 1 was already defined, which is like a center color, like a black. So I can just add that style to the top of the panel. Set your margins and whatnot else in there. And then, so for the guts of it, again, the guts of it, I wasn't going to rip out everything. It's just one of those components, those pieces, the little talk parts, be in HTML. So just set the content mode to HTML and add that component on there. So if you're pulling like fragments or parts that maybe your designers wrote or styled, and you want to integrate those into your application, you can easily do that. Just put those pieces that you need to, and still worry about the problems that you need to worry about, the logic, the flow, that kind of stuff. So I made a simple class here that would initialize all those other pieces of web parts. Not a ton of code in there. You can go there. So for each part that I pulled in again, I dumped those parts into like a resource file. Pull those in. You build a link button, and you can add all those pieces of information that you need on there. Real straightforward, real simple. Not a ton of code, which is the big thing that I love that coming from it. Any questions about this? Is there any other parts of the code you guys want me to dive into before?
Just out of curiosity, sorry, Dan. Can you go view source on the generated HTML? I want to see if it generates like IDs for all the elements and stuff.
Oh, for like unit testing and stuff like that, yeah.
Well, functional, but yeah.
So
you like grab any one of the elements?
view page source isn't going to give you a ton. I can explore it if you want. I'll like inspect if you want me
No,
to.
I meant like if you close. Oh, okay. Is this Chrome?
Just go down to the.
Firefox. All right. Look for like ID
Yeah.
equals, double quotes or something, or can you do an inspect element? Yeah. Look at the heading there, for example, the Seizure heading or the date and time or something.
Highlight the 21 days of Vaadin.
Yeah, just right click on the 21 Days of Vaadin and go to inspect elements.
Oh, in your page.
Oh, and the page.
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah.
Oh,
So,
yeah, sure. So these things those are a lot of the styles that you can add.
Yeah.
So these are the built-in ones. There's a lot of the built-in ones, the way that they style their components. So you can add things like there's like a clear to remove things as well too, right? So these are like the standards that they come with your panels and whatnot, and your layout has a special style with it as well too.
Can you open that? I want to see like if the content actually has an ID tag on it.
This part, the code.
Open the div.
Just open the div.
Okay, sorry about that.
Oh, yeah, there we go. Okay. So testing this could be a bit of a challenge, right? Well, I guess you could use CSS or.
So do you want to do something like you want to add like an ID or something?
Like
Name it.
like Selenium tests or something.
Probably tack on
Yeah, you could probably add a style in there like or something to name it.
Okay.
Okay,
Give it an ID. I see. Okay.
Yeah, you can. Is that what you're looking for, like a functionality, like an accessibility, kind of get into it? Like what component am I looking for? You don't want to look for the hard-coded string of, 21 Days of Vaadin.
So you put that in the code basically.
Yeah.
And then okay.
And so they do have so one of the, I guess maybe it was the knock on anything, the frustrating thing is, it's a company, right? So they want to make money. So some of the things you have to pay for, there's like a developer pro and whatnot, and it's not cheap, so like your developer's not going to pay for it on its own. For the most part, the company's going to fit that bill. Do you guys pay for any of that stuff at your work? And so it comes with, they have a test bench suite that comes with it, so they can, a full robust suite for testing their stuff. And they have a lot of other components that come with it too. They also have a visual builder, like a visual UI builder. So you can do the WYSIWYG, drag and drop kind of stuff. Do you use that?
No, I've not used it. There is a test kit I've not used. There's a visual test kit that harnesses one of the frameworks. I can't remember, like Cactus or something like that. I can't remember. So yeah, they actually provide, that's one of the few paid products, is that test kit.
Yeah. Some of the other paid ones were like the charts, which I was hoping that you would get more of that for free. I guess you could always integrate with like Google Chart or something similar to what they did with the JavaScript file, right? Just use it as your render and keep the data in Java. Yeah.
How is it running unit tests with this? I mean, I'm sure you can use just regular TestNG or JUnit, but does Vaadin come with any special test framework bits to plug into?
Yeah, so that's what we're talking about. Like, that's one of the paid things. That was kind of one of the pain points. Is that's a paid thing to use their test framework that they have. That's already built in. That integrates well with all their components to run through.
For unit as well as functional tests.
I I would believe so. I'm not, I mean, as far as the unit tests, like, that's kind of one of the things that I would try to, you want to, and when you talked about is you want to abstract, like, your code, right, your functional code versus the actual UI layer of that.
So having done a lot of GWT, you basically try to get all of your code that isn't UI related, not know about GWT. Right, you just unit test that just like you would any other code.
That makes sense.
And there is a GWT test harness, but it is quite slow to run.
Do like auto audits or Jenkins or something like that, you might not want to run on the daily on your own, right? What do you guys do for testing?
Clicking and dragging and
Manual testing.
yelling at each other.
The other one. So there's some of the adding style names and kind of saying that as the primary styles. That's the one that happens first, right? Or gets inherited last, I guess. The CSS way. And then here on the button, on the menu as well, adding different styles and whatnot. And we probably can. The thing you wanted to do right here. Do you set IDs on your components? When you,
Not usually.
I have built a harness to apply them, and it's not painless because you can't use any of their templating tools because they don't let you put IDs in them.
do you think? Yeah. So set ID is on there, so if we want to do. If you want to set those IDs, name it, you can kind of switch to. And kind of what I did with Swing now is you want to name a lot of your components, because you want to test that, right? If you want to dive through, does that still functionally work after I make changes to another part? So I would imagine you'd be able to kind of navigate through like this as well too, but it seems like it'd be slow because you're going to communicate back and forth and kind of talk to the browser as well. So, as this is built from the demo, they're still cropped in here as well too, but really, these are the main pieces, and you saw how small the amount of code was for this one. The home view as well too, you saw. There's not much else to it. Really straightforward, really easy. Even if you wanted to build a web page in it, it wasn't difficult at all. So, what can I do with this new Vaadin skill? So we quickly polled the room. We had one person working on Vaadin. So I did a quick little search. Indeed, Seattle, not too many openings, so wasn't good. Vaadin, just the US in general, I think there's 84 posts. So part of the things, one of the things Andy, my coworkers mentioned, is a good portion of those actually might be listed as GWT as well too, people moving forward, so they might not be looking for that particular skill set. Also knowing that not a ton of people have experience with this as well, right? Recruiters as well could probably talk to that more. I don't know how often do you guys ever, have you guys even heard of a client or customer asking for this?
For Vaadin?
Vaadin? Nope. Right. So that was one of the that I think parts of this whole thing was going through was like, oh, this is really awesome, this is cool. Not a lot of people using this. So
Well, to be fair, it's a lot more popular in Europe.
true. Again, coming from Finland, right? So
I was gonna add, also, you could argue that it's so easy to use and really easy to train people up in, so you don't need to advertise for someone that particular skill set.
right. So that's one of the things, right? You might just be looking for, do they have general Java knowledge as well too?
Do you look for swing developers? Is that what you're?
Is it in swing?
Oh, I was just wondering if
Well, yeah,
people don't have experience, who do you look for? You look for a swing developer and then teach them.
somebody who's had some sort of UI toolkit experience.
Right. So again, like it's very, if you've done swing, it's so familiar. You know, you're going through the stuff. You're like, you feel like you're writing swing sometimes, right? This is the buttons, the action listeners, even the trees, right? It feels very similar. And I do think that anybody that's had some type of UI experience, whether that even be in C++, whatever, is going to be familiar with this. It's going to be easy to pick this up. So it's not going to be like, you don't have to target that in what you're looking for. So kind of follow the trends on it as well too. So again, if you notice, again, swing, right, going downhill. It's been going for a while. Width kind of fluctuating there as well too, but then not too great. Yeah, I loved it. I thought the experience was great. I thought it was good to actually be able to get back into it and be doing it in the web. I did have to question a couple times, like, is this worth it? Like, I mean, am I reinventing the wheel here? People have already done this? I mean, JavaScript has come a long way, right? So people have been building web applications and other things besides Java, and just using Java on the back end, right? Because it's robust and it's great for that. So, is this something that I should really invest in? Is it worth that? I mean, those are all questions I think for you guys to just answer personally, right? But for me, for the work that we're doing, I could definitely see using this to monitor several of our services, a report on a lot of our, we have a lot of failed reporting that's done. It's like these little hack pages that's not maintained a lot. And I just have to pull Damon over here, the master, of like, hey, do you remember when somebody wrote this? Do you know how to maintain this or what's going on here? So it would be nice to be able to grab something and put something on top of that.
Yeah, I think one of the big bonuses of this and sort of the similar thing for GWT is that it's, if you're a Java developer and you want a simple little, like mostly internal tool to just check something really quick or share something really quick about your service, you can write your UI all in Java without having to, you know, maybe I'll check out some Ember tutorials and figure out JavaScript and a new language. And, you know, it's like, no, I really just wanted that table that showed all of the people, and you can have it up in an hour. You know, it's really useful for a lot of quick things like that. As a Java developer.
So I'll just say that while Vaadin might not be that big, GWT actually has got quite a few jobs around the Seattle area. Aptio hires lots of GWT people. There's Amazon has a lot of GWT jobs, and what's Google's latest two big projects, calculator, the spreadsheet I should say, and the inbox.
Yes.
We're both GWT based. Yet the thing that's interesting is both of those they gave up on the UI. They decided that the problem was both of those are calculation heavy, and so they basically wanted to have a lingua franca to go across all their platforms, and so they merged GWT for the web, Android obviously for Java for Android, J2 Objective-C for delivering on the Apple space. And so they basically had a single Java base, and then they wrapped it with specific UI. And it was, and one of the problems they were having is they were having a feature crisis because they couldn't keep the three different code bases current when they were doing it all in JavaScript or all in Java and all in Objective-C. So they couldn't keep the features working. But once they decided to split it into 4 groups, the common code, the Objective-C UI, the Android UI, and the web UI, they were able to do a rolling release that's uniformly delivered. Mm-hmm. So you sort of get this situation where you have GWT works really well for these sort of smaller things, and it works really well in the really large stuff. And it's the stuff in the middle that's sort of
Yeah, so just to his point, here in Seattle, we've got about 23, only one in Bellevue, so most of them here in Seattle. These guys are probably pretty happy.
Yeah, no,
so to mention that with the strong backing of GWT, and I know that Vaadin is huge in the GWT community as well. I guess click on it. They just had their big GWT Create conference.
Yeah, I went
So there's tons of videos for that as well too. And Vaadin is one of the main backers of this as well too.
They are the primary hosts. I went there.
Okay.
I went to the conference.
The one in Germany? I hope?
No, God, no. The one in San Francisco.
The one in San Francisco. Okay. And
I wouldn't mind going to Germany. What was the question?
Yeah, I know that ESPN was doing a bunch of their internal work in GWT, but I don't know if that was also the Disney work out here.
So the big thing too, if you haven't been here, this is like their website is just full of stuff. It knows about me. So the big statement that they have here is thinking of you and I. And I think that really did ring true for me throughout this experience. Making it easy, making it familiar, and just get up and running.
So one of the things they showed off at the conference, which I thought was really cool, is they're building the web components. And so the one that they showed off they dropped 1 million lines of data into a table, and the thing just scrolled beautifully. And it turns out what they were doing is literally rolling the rows around in the table. It had a very small number of rows, and they were rolling these rows around as they were populating them off screen. And so they basically said they had like 3 man-years of work building this thing over like a 3-month time period. And it basically was like 30,000 lines of Java being compiled down and then wrapped in a very lightweight JavaScript adapter to make it into a regular web component.
Yeah, that widget's called Grid, and so Table is the equivalent, the older version. It's still fully supported.
Yes.
But Grid, they wanted to rewrite their table from scratch to make it extremely performant, like you're describing.
It was way impressive.
So, just if anybody's looking at it, there's 2 widgets that both do the same idea. It's just Grid is brand new.
Yeah, and so from the Vaadin site, I think they've got the demo video kind of rolling that out and showing, Grid's the next big thing and in that experience and what they've done with that. So tons of videos on there again. It's great to have that. A lot of these frameworks you're just not going to do that support. And with a company backing it, it's pretty helpful too. And the GWT, again, they've gone through a major overhaul as well too. If you guys haven't looked at it lately, they've really invested a lot, it seems like, in their tool set.
They're still running behind on the 2.8 release, I think, or unless you were using 2.8.
No, I'm not.
Okay.
Okay.
So what about debugging? And I think somebody already touched on this, like performance, right?
Let's debug. Let's do that. We're here in the US. I'm probably not running a debug. Let's run a debug. What do we run? The Seizure site? Let's do that. Let's put a breakpoint in somewhere. Let's start.
Because it's all Java, you get to use your Java toolkit. So it's all, you use your regular debugger and
You assume that the generated JavaScript and everything is fine, bug-free, works, no issues.
Actually,
There's a catch to that question.
you can see that right now as you go to.
Actually, in the 6 years I worked with GWT, I only had 1 compiler error. I have lots of my own errors.
I guess good has come a long way since we looked at it last time, don't you?
Yeah.
I did anyways. You obviously been working with it.
So I put a breakpoint in the. Oh, I get a loading bar and then something's flashing down there. I don't know what that is. Oh, my ID stopped. So I guess let me put a breakpoint in. So again, debug just like anything else, which is nice. You can see it actually getting to the page, you can see the data that came in there. And then if we want, we can, again, step through. Work as render. Step into it. Watch it set up things. So if you're confused on I think this saved me a lot too. There was a couple things like, why does this style look all funny? Like, why is this thing not getting what I set on it? And there was a couple points where like, oh, because I'm calling that twice. So just go through. So it's, again, it's that familiarity, right? That you can just keep using what you already know. I can step into my code that pulls out the map of all the different parts that are going to be rendered on that page. I can see what each one looks like, but you guys all know bugging it.
Did you have any opportunity to make, sometimes you'll enter data in one field and then maybe you want that to fire an event that,
Listeners. Yeah, the listeners.
yeah, did you?
So yeah, that was one of the, we want to, you want to add, we can just add that button, I guess, to this page if you want. Let's stop. So just like, go back. Stop. Sorry, I hate having to look over my shoulder to do that. So that was the listener, but we can add it and then we can show you and we can walk through. Simple, just add a button, new button, with a click listener. Pretty straightforward. Gives the fire off an action, gives the show a notification. So we can do the
You can also change the code live while it's running, which is
right, and it will just reload.
I'm pretty good at that. Are you using Juggler? It's already
Oh, can you use JDK8 constructs? Lambdas and things
Yes.
like that with the handlers on?
Yep.
Okay, cool.
Yep.
And
Yeah, if it's all pure Java, you can use your Lambda syntax, so it's fine.
And so in that Spring JPA one, it's using Java 8, and they're just passing around all the functions. So like for these listeners, they're just passing in a function that they have, a method that they have called earlier on. So
One caveat though, when you start, they have a plugin for the IDEs, and by default, it sets your source code to Java 7. So you just have to go ahead and tweak it and say Java 8, then you can use your Lambdas. That's just a Maven IDE thing, not really a
Yeah.
mod thing.
Power setting.
no, like pulling the wrong click listener. Looks like I pulled in the wrong one. We'll do that.
Use semicolon, nice.
Yeah, I think this guy's deprecated. Don't worry about it. It wants a.
Oh, why don't you just say button.add plug listener, might be easier.
Oh, yeah. Seems to want that. That's a bad. Why is that deprecated?
It's deprecated, doesn't mean you can't do it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's probably not good.
Turns out there's a small memory leak if you use click listeners, and they have a different mechanism, a click handler.
Is that what I was looking at? What are you complaining about? Oops, what did I miss?
Might be the wrong import for the click listener.
Yeah, show the imports.
Oh. No. Why demo? Let's go into you, how about that? Oh,
We need
you want click listener?
yes, but which click listener?
Yeah, right. Is a button UI button click listener.
Oh, so you're getting the regular GWT click listener in one place instead of the Vaadin one.
Is that what I have here?
That would be my guess. Or you might even be getting,
What's up in your?
you might even getting the swing click listener.
Yeah, I've gotten swing sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you. Good.
GWT, yeah. Yeah, now in Vaadin 7, they built GWT right in all the source code for it, so you will often, you have to be careful with that type ahead. You can get GWT widgets instead of the Vaadin widgets.
Oh, everything runs nice. Go ahead and rerun that. Oh, it's probably this. Oh, sorry. This is not my normal Eclipse. They set this one up just for Vaadin. It doesn't auto-save. Find a pain. Oh, you know what we did wrong? What do? We just have a button. And we didn't add anything. So let's add that guy. On the mailing list. Around there. Oh, did you notice that? So that was a cool thing too that I really liked. It noticed that this session got disconnected. So it automatically popped that up. Hey, anything you're working with is not attached to any session anymore. So that's built in for you.
He's referring to the gray bar at the very top.
So this was our previous session, right? I shut down and then ran it again. No extra code for that.
Does it give you client-side session, sort of client-side session or something like that?
Yeah, so the client-side stuff will still run. So Vaadin has this notion of there's server-side and client-side. You can build your app as a client-side app, or you can build it as a server-side app, which is the more powerful way, and it's the way that they recommend to do it.
Server side?
Yes.
Going off, maybe this is what you're asking. When you connect to the server, you're given both a session and a UI. And so then you can open up multiple tabs in the same session and you'll have a separate UI. So there's a Vaadin UI component, which is your entry point for all of your code. And so there'll be one UI per tab, and then you can have multiple tabs per user session. And so there's also a separate library that will scope Spring Beans to those sessions and UIs too.
So is the model the same on the server side when you're like opening up multiple tabs, or will they each have their own session state?
There'll be one session state and multiple UI states. Yeah.
So yeah, it's a truly multi-window web app.
Did we get a notification?
Yeah, it's in the middle.
Where's that?
It was.
Yeah.
Right over, click here.
Oh, I see. Oh.
Yeah, there it goes. So, I mean, you can style those. You can put raw HTML in those as well too. Especially like we talked about, like if you have your designers that are going to be showing your notification messages, you want to have somebody to style those probably for you, like kind of just raw HTML. Anyway. Yeah. So there was our Quick Listener demo. As long as you import the right Quick Listener. So yeah, using Spring. So I auto-wired in a bunch of the repositories. So Spring. With Spring as well too, you have to use their annotations. These are views versus the UI. So the views are just kind of like in place. I almost think of them like frames. I know they're not iframes or whatever, but it's just replacing that content for you, like in that right panel with a different view. And so all this stuff is auto-wired in, works directly with Spring. I'm not creating any more mini repositories. You notice that the views all have to be prototyped because that's just the session scope that you talked about, right? You can't be sharing your view with somebody else, right? We have that same session state information. And so like on the home view. I don't want to show you that message. Where we at? The notification. So I don't want to show you that notification message twice. I only want to show it once per session, so you can store that information in there. I don't know if that's the best way that Vaadin recommends to do it, but that was the way that I was able to easily find out and just store information. Have I showed somebody a notification already? Don't redisplay it. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. Any other question, Bob? Cool. Well,
One more in the middle here.
oh, sorry, I missed you.
What's atmosphere?
Sorry, Mr. Yano,
What's atmosphere?
I don't know. I missed
I
something?
can tell you, Atmosphere is an open source library that's used for push, for
Oh.
web push. And so Vaadin has adopted it in Vaadin 7, so they support, all you can do is put annotation at push, and bam, your Vaadin app is push savvy. So push meaning that you can update data on your server and have it appear on the web page without interaction by the user. So without push, the user has to like click a button and then it's sending a message back to the server. Your app really lives on the server. That's the whole thing about Vaadin, is that your app and all your state is on the server, not the client. So when you click a button, it informs the server side, you react, and then it pushes that, it delivers that, renders that information on the client side. So what if you want to like every minute update something? Well, they now build that into support. You just say, change the text on my label, and if push is enabled, it will show up on the client side automatically. So they use Atmosphere because it does a whole fallback. It tries to use WebSockets up front, and if WebSockets isn't available, it does one of the other, web polling type techniques. So the cool thing is Atmosphere has been built for years and years. So push, even though it's new in Vaadin, it works pretty well. Just that push in general is new, and it really depends on the browsers and the server. So like only the latest versions of Apache Tomcat support push. So you've got to have a push savvy server and Atmosphere now built into Vaadin.
So since you got me on something, you either get shiny glasses or a rechargeable battery pack. Shiny glasses, I think I've seen it.
I'll pass.
I will send the battery pack your way for answering the question.
All right. I can actually show you push. If you want to bring up a project I'm working on right now, the first page is automatically uploaded. It's app.powerwrangler.ca. Yeah, W-R-A, yep.
.ca.
He's Canadian.
You've got porn.
So, yeah. This is the electrical power generation market in Alberta, Canada. So basically it's tables of all the power plants in Alberta. But if you notice in the upper right-hand corner it says interval and it has the date time. So you'll notice within a minute, hopefully that will change. 2119 will go to 2120 because every minute we're scraping data off of different data feeds and then pushing it to this form on screen. There, it just went 2120. So that's push in action, and that's, I know Atmosphere well because I see quite a few errors, in the logs about Atmosphere, having problems. Like I said, push is bleeding edge technology in the web world, so, but it generally works really well.
So the other thing that I didn't play with as much too, which is a big thing from Swing, is the whole notion of the UI thread versus just running your regular application logic, because you don't want to run big heavy operations right on the UI. So I think that's where the big advantage that comes from server side is you get to do all that expensive work on the server side, right? You're not slowing down your UI. Speaking to that though, like if you've got something on a simple timer and just updating or changing labels. Do you guys do that, or you have to do special logic
Well,
from that? That's what you're talking
that
about
gets
here?
more complicated. You're not really supposed to use the timer class, the Java timer class on server environments. There's a more sophisticated thing now called the scheduled executors, which is the same sort of idea. It's timer on steroids. So yes, that's what I do. Is I use scheduled executors that are firing off, hitting the database, seeing if there's new data, and then pushing it to the. Actually, that's what's cool. Is I don't push it to the web page. All I do is update my data model,
Right, you just
and there's listeners on the web page that pull it in automatically, via Atmosphere, pushing it to them. That's the cool thing. It's like all I'm doing is just updating my Java data models.
One more.
Before you close the page, can you shut off the gas?
Well, I will point out a couple things. These icons are the what you mentioned earlier, the
Font awesome.
Font Awesome. Yeah, those are actually font. I had some graphics. I replaced them with Font Awesome. And these are actually several different tables that we were referring, not the new grid widget, but the older table widgets. And I think it looks really nice, but I don't claim any credit. This is all default Vaadin theme. This is the older theme called Reindeer. The new theme is called Velo, which is more like Android, Mac, iOS. To me, it's too big and too thin. This is called the Reindeer theme, and I think it's ideal for business apps in terms of size and readability and tone.
So the other demo that went with that, the fun awesome one is they a lot of times you'll have your own custom icons sets, especially with SVGs. You can turn those into fun sets as well too that can scale. So depending on what label or where you're using it, if you're using it in a heading, it's going to scale to the heading size, and you're not going to get any pixelation or any of that kind of stuff. You don't need separate resources, right? You just build that fun library, and it integrates well. And you build like a set of events for you.
Oh.
Oh, sorry, to run Vaadin, is it just, it runs in Tomcat?
Yeah, so I'm just running it here as Spring Boot, right? It's just like a little Tomcat. But yeah, you can just run it. Most of their little demo apps that aren't the Spring Boot ones are running inside of Tomcat. And so you can just run that inside of.
And do you need a license just for those tools, like a paid license just for the add-on tools, or?
Yeah, so there's no paid licenses for any of the stuff that, like what I was showing you there. The paid licenses, I think, come into some of their add-ons and some of their, they have like the developer toolset stuff. And it looks really great. It's just, is a regular person at home messing around with it, I'm not gonna pay for that. But in a company environment, yeah, I can see it definitely be worth that.
Is there like a developer mode where all the JavaScript is unminified and the production mode where everything gets bundled up?
Yeah, so there is, I didn't look into too much of the, so all these are I think, running in developer mode. I didn't check it to see what's going on with production mode. I actually deleted there was like a ton of code that's set up for configuring that as well too. And I wouldn't say a ton, no, there's like a method. But I wanted to keep it as simple as possible, right, just for a demo. But I imagine their production mode minimizes as well too, and there's that little piece in the front that compresses all of like JavaScript that's being sent across. And have you guys run into problems with that? I mean, you're compressing everything. Do you have that? Do you know what I mean?
Use default settings.
You just use straight up default. Okay. Cool.
Performance has been surprisingly good. I'm really amazed.
So how is security and stuff, like, I mean, we always have our website scanned, and then our security department comes back and says, oh, you
That's
need
actually
to
one
add
of the
this
things I
and
like
that.
is that because the app lives on the server, it's just rendering. I kind of think of like the old X Windows technology, it's immensely, I'm always thinking on the server. So my app is making a connection to the database, for example, in Java on my server side. So the client is not like hitting my database. So all it's
Like
doing is rendering.
Cross-site scripting, so maybe you're just displaying and not taking input.
Well, there is data there, not on that screen, but there you can do data entry. But the thing is that the Vaadin has a JavaScript library that's on the client side that's feeding that to the Vaadin engine on the server side. So it's really difficult. I mean,
So does it know like that you can't inject script into your database and stuff like that? Because I have to add
it
special
would
things
be really
to the
difficult
website.
to do that. It'd be really difficult to do that because they'd have to be hacking through all the processing that Vaadin is doing, and they're sitting. They have a JavaScript library on the client side that's talking with their own scripts, a Java engine on the back end. So you would have to be hacking their protocol for talking back and forth. So it's pretty much inherently safe, relatively speaking. Obviously, you still need to do SQL injection.
Yeah, that's what I was saying.
Like, because it's just data on the form data feed, but.
I don't know. I'm a little suspicious on that one. I from some of their stuff, I know that they've had issues that they've had to address because of security concerns. I mean, it's the web, right? So there's a lot of stuff out there. It might be a little bit more difficult, but there's probably a way, right?
Yeah.
And so there's definitely safeguards you're going to want to put in. I wouldn't just go blindly into this.
So is there any sort of a consensus on Vaadin being significantly better than GWT or Like, do you get so much more that,
I think the thing that came was simplicity and the ease of use and the styling. So, like again, looking around the room, we only had 2 people that were kind of really familiar with this, and so getting more people into it. I think Gwit had its headaches, and I think some people have had some experience with Gwit. We had some headaches with it, and we couldn't do as much. Having that extra layer on top to facilitate it, make it easier, make it quicker to develop, I think is the big thing that you're getting out of it, right? I think you can probably do everything that you can do in Vaadin in Gwit, but it's just that extra layer, right? That extra layer of abstraction. All right, that's it for my talk. Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it. Cool. Thanks, Nolan.
All right, so